Looked and we need to do more and more with it here at the National Aphasia Association. So as you enter the room, please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you are calling in from. I'm here in North Carolina, and yesterday it was 29 degrees in the morning and 70 by the afternoon. So basically, everyone's going to be sick here in North Carolina. So everybody, if you would like to pop in and tell people, okay, we have New Jersey in the house. You know, we have Tennessee and some other North Carolinians here. So please let everybody know where you guys are calling in from. Say hello. Um, and we'll get started in just a minute. We like to make sure we have enough people in. Remember, one of the things about Ask the Expert is that it is a live production, but we do have this going recording and being on our YouTube channel. It is often looked at on our YouTube channel, as we have wonderful playlists available for you. And we do hope that you check that out. I am going to change the...
We're called the National Aphasia Association, but I'm so happy to see people from really a lot of people from Canada here tonight and in our groups from all over the world. Like it's very open, and especially in PPA, I know it's hard to find. So please tell your friends, come on, join
Yep.
us.
There'll be a lot we're going to be talking about in terms of what the NAA has now and will be adding thanks to these wonderful people. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and remind you just of a few of the logistical things before I shut my camera off and just sit and check out the question and answer. So we do have two ways for you to get involved today. One is a question and answer section. If you have a question, please put it in there. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. If we don't get to your question, we will definitely be saving the transcript and getting back to you. We also would love for you to put your thoughts in the chat, encouragement, thoughts, anything that resonates with you. It's wonderful for the speakers and the panel to recognize that they're not alone, that there's lots of people going through this. As I mentioned, we will try to get to as many questions as possible. Sometimes a question will come up that doesn't have to do with the current topic, and that's fine. We do ask that you send an email to answers@aphasia.org. We also have a new opportunity that is offered the week after every Ask the Expert, and it is called After the Expert. It's a conversation group on the Wednesday following, and it's from 12 to 1 Eastern time. And we just talk about the topic. So if you didn't get to hear we can't see you, you could be in your pajamas, but later, next week, it'll be a group that everybody can see and talk to each other. We also now are providing one professional development hour for ASHA certification maintenance for speech pathologists who attend the live Ask the Expert and watch the entire thing. The certificate will be shared at the end of the webinar. I am so thrilled to be able to introduce our guests today, our experts, both the experts that are speech pathologists and the experts that are our panel members. First, I'm going to be introducing Kiiya. Kiiya Shibata is a speech language pathologist and PhD candidate at Vanderbilt University. Her work focuses on communication and wellness for people living with primary progressive aphasia and primary progressive apraxia of speech and their loved ones. She serves and serves and serves the National Aphasia Association in so many capacities, and was able to be hired to the NAA for some hours per month thanks to the Outdrive Aphasia fundraiser, which has been happening annually in honor of a family that is dealing with primary progressive aphasia. She helps lead our PPA chats, our PPA care partner support group, and also helps me tons with program development. So I'm thrilled to have Kiiya here. Abbe Simon is a longtime practicing speech pathologist, a health coach, a yoga instructor, an all around awesome friend and colleague of mine personally. And she recognizes that the impact of aphasia goes beyond the person who, quote, has it. Abbe emphasizes being a care partner is part of who you are and supports clients and help find balance in the relationships with while considering the presence of aphasia. Abbe has a private practice called I Communicare and does amazing work there with her intensive programs individually for people with aphasia and their families. And most important, sorry guys, but most important is our panel. I am going to let Lisa, Kath, and Becky introduce themselves along with this panel. I'm going to stop my share because they all have their unique stories and their lived experiences. And so I am going to hand it over to this amazing group, and I will be in the background if you need anything.
Great.
Take it away,
My name is
girls.
Lisa, and I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. My partner of 25 years was diagnosed with PPA in 2023, and he's 49 right now, just had a birthday, and I'm 47. So this was kind of a shock, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for introducing yourself. Becky, do you want to go? We'll do Becky and then Kath.
Hi, I'm Becky Grisby. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is the suburb of DC. My husband and I have been married 31 years, 11 of which, the last 11 of which, we've been dealing with PPA and PPAOS and now PSP. It's sort of a shifting picture as they discover things. And so we've been at it a while and changed things over time, including he hasn't been able to speak for about 5 years at all. And we are now dealing with a sort of more advanced physical symptoms. And so he has been on a feeding tube for 2 years and so forth. But that's us.
Thank you. Becky is a wealth of knowledge, as is everyone else on the call tonight. Kath.
Hi, my name is Catherine Klein. My spouse, Karen, we've been together 35 years, and I think Karen first started noticing symptoms of primary progressive aphasia about 5 years ago, but was formally diagnosed about 3.5 years ago. And we are probably in the middle stages of it, where a fair amount of loss of language and comprehension, and but we're making the best of it.
Thank you so much for being here
Oh,
tonight.
and I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. But a shout out to Silver Spring, Maryland. I grew up there.
We're a East Coast, well, not me, but everyone else, an East Coast group tonight. I'm here from Nashville, from California. Abby's going to frame, the term care partner versus caregiver, totally a personal preference, but we use care partner. So Abby will talk us through that, and then we'll jump into some chatting, some hanging and chatting and hearing about these wonderful people and how they learn what they are learning and what they have learned through this process.
Thank you all. Thanks for being here, each of you, as we've already said. The month of November is devoted, as though every day and week and month typically have some special highlight to focus on. But many of you have probably heard that the month of November is recognizing caregivers. You probably see that in some of the social media or literature that you get. And caregiver is a very well respected and used term. We do like to emphasize, at least, for us here tonight and in my practice, the word care partner, especially when it comes to having aphasia in your life, to emphasize that if we think of someone as a caregiver, the implication is that you are very giving of yourself, which you are. And care partner means you are part of a relationship where there's more give and take. And so we'd like to emphasize that as the presence of PPA changes in your lives and in all of our lives, being a care partner will stay the same. You just will have to begin to meet your person in that communication partnership in a different way. And remember that you can convey to them that you're not only there to give, but to receive. So I hope everybody understands why we prefer care partner instead of caregiver in this context.
Great. Thank you for that background. So we are going to just jump right in and open it very broadly up to, for those care partners attending tonight, and anybody impacted by PPA, what are sort of what first comes to mind for you about what you've learned about yourself through this experience, and any words, or I don't want to say advice, but anything you would want to say to someone else that you're meeting in the earlier stages, or not, I mean, in any stage that may not have, had the chance to connect with others.
Yeah, and I like, just before you guys say something, I like what she said, what you've learned about yourself. So make this about you as opposed to the person that actually has the PPA, emphasizing the care partner here. So what have you noticed or learned about yourselves? Go ahead, Becky.
I would say one of the things that I've noticed is how my expectations have needed to change, and that I work to make the best of what we have now and not look back or not look forward too much, but be in the moment. And that means I've made tons of mistakes. Sometimes we run up into problems that are new, and how can this happen? But it's kind of taught me a little bit about flexibility and patience, and also joy.
Oh, that's a promise. Okay.
We'll circle back to joy later. Kath, would you like to go next? Or you guys can just kind of hop in. Otherwise I'll.
Lisa, you want to jump in?
Sure. I think I've learned that I am stronger than I thought I was, and that I am more capable of giving myself grace than I really have been in the past, and recognizing that this isn't going to be perfect, and I'm going to fumble and make mistakes, and I'm learning to be okay with that. And also I'm a lot better at asking for help than I've been in my past lives. So that's a good thing that I've learned.
Kath, did you have anything to
Yeah,
add?
I think I guess what I've learned, sort of similar to what Lisa said, that most times I would agree with the statement that I've learned that I'm stronger than I would have expected. And I've also learned that I do best when I'm meeting Karen where she is in her progression, which has shifted over time. And when I lose sight of maybe changes that have happened or whatever, and I'm having a hard time adjusting to to some progression or something, and I lose that feeling of being able to meet someone where they are, that's when things kind of get more difficult for me, and I get very judgmental of myself, like I'm not doing this well enough. I'm not doing this well enough for her.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wrote that down. Like, I do best when I meet her where she is. And I think that that's a very profound statement. I think everybody probably in this group has had moments where they're maybe a little hard on themselves or are, you know, feeling like they're failing, or they're failing as a partner, just partner, period, care partner also. Does anyone want to speak to, any experiences around that and sort of how you've coped or not with that? We're open to all of it.
My experience is that I've been, I think that it was Lisa who said asking for help more. um, the old thing that Fred Rogers said, Mr. Rogers said, that look for the helpers. And actually, I have found that there are an awful lot of people around me who can be made to understand what's going on with me, and be my sounding boards, be my support system. And that's been useful to me to open up myself more to that.
I just wanted to say, when we ask care partners how they feel in these situations, you might be hesitant to admit some of the deep feelings or the experiences that you go through during this process. Because while Becky mentioned joy and positivity, I think we all acknowledge that when you receive a diagnosis that has a progressive course ahead, there could be a lot of questions like, why me? How did this happen? What should I have done? What do I do now? How committed do I have to be? And I think sometimes when care partners try to bring out all the positive, and I'm not being a Debbie Downer here, because I witness every day the power of care partner strength and how people are in it. And I think there are moments when the reality and all the things you do well sometimes get overshadowed, right, by this feeling of overwhelm. And when and how do I look for more information, and what more can I do? How much of this pressure falls on me now and not them? And so I wonder, while you're talking about how this lands on you, I'm curious if you guys would share how much you involve, or how much you have been involving your partner during the process of your decision making, of looking for help and getting more information. Like, do you feel like it's all on you, or do you feel like you're including your partner or maybe other people in your lives?
Well, I was going speaking to that, and also on something Kath said about meeting your partner where they are. We've had a strange day here where things started out. This is a lot of our days, but I thought we were doing okay today, and then towards the end things kind of shifted, and suddenly it was a really hard day, and it was unexpected. It's always unexpected, but I just really wasn't prepared for that today, because I was excited about this. I was doing my own things, and um, I forget sometimes to meet him where he is, sometimes because it changes from day to day sometimes. And so, Abby, to answer your question, it depends on the day of how much I'm engaging him in the decisions. It depends on where he is. Some days he's on point and he can be really involved in that. And some days I can't communicate with him. So
Yeah,
it
I think that's
depends.
a really interesting point. And I wonder if people listening or everybody else here finds, is when you say the days are unpredictable, right? Yet we have this progression of language and then maybe some cognition where you think, well, I know which way it's going, right? I can predict that it's getting advanced. But when you say each day is different, can you expand that a little bit? Like what varies so much?
Um, well, in my world, for example, his brother passed away about a year and a half ago, and that will hit him really hard when something comes up and he starts thinking about it, and he gets stuck, and he closes off and he becomes nonverbal, and it'll be something I didn't even realize was part of the day. Something happened that I didn't see. He listened to a song. So we'll be just having, he'll start the day off, happy, everything's going well. And then suddenly it's like whiplash, and there's just a dark cloud, and things are not, everything changes. Everything changes. His ability to communicate, his ability to make a decision, his ability to help with our dog, everything
Okay.
changes.
Okay.
I would gather that part of it, at least in my own case, our own case, is fatigue. I know I have people in my life who deal with ADHD, and they talk about spoons and the amount of spoons you have, and you can only do so many, and then you run out, and you can't manage anymore because all out of spoons for the day. So I guess that probably argues for trying to front load your days as much as possible if the decisions are going to be made earlier.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
and
a good point.
I'm noticing that one of the folks attending tonight is saying about finding it hard to know just how much my husband is understanding. And I run into that a lot now in this place where we are with Karen's progression, where you can, it just, as Lisa and Becky were saying, it can depend on the time of day and whether your person has gotten tired, and all of a sudden I notice lots of words are dropping off, or there's just pointing happening, um, or more frustration, but there are other times where the communication seems a little smoother, and then I get tripped up and think, oh, we're doing okay. This is being understood, this, that, and the other. But an hour later, I'll realize with a question that gets asked or something that I was not getting it, that I was not being understood. And I think it's easy for the person with PPA to want to just make you feel okay. They're nodding and agreeing and you think they've got it, and they don't. And so it has been harder and harder. I guess the longer answer to this is it's become harder and harder to include Karen in lots of decision making or extensive stuff because she can't follow it. But
I know. And there's a lot of comments here that people really resonate with this. And I'm sorry if I'm just jumping in, but I want to say as a speech pathologist that admittedly, when PPA it evolves to the point where these language interruptions really affect important topics, it's kind of like, I wish I would have done something sooner. I wish I would have communicated certain decisions that we all as humans will have to make at some point. And those are really tough topics to bring up to someone when a PPA diagnosis is initially given. Wow, you're going to be faced with this communication challenge, and there are decisions we've never talked about. And I know it sounds premature, but we may need to have these tough conversations now. That's one thing. And the other thing I just have to say, based on people's reaction here, is I often say, and I have said this to people that I work with, um, sometimes you just got to become an actor. And when a person with PPA really can't understand something, it's not their fault. They're not trying to be difficult. You got to just kind of push through it and act in a way that it isn't as significant, and know that the audience you have requires a different way of delivering the material. And it's hard for the receiver, for the communication partner, the care partner to say, but I would have talked to them a different way before, and I want them to understand. They're asking to understand, but they really have such a hard time doing so. And how do you say, move on? You know what?
yeah.
We talk sometimes, Kath and I, blame the PPA. Up, that's that PPA. It's making it really hard. And how that lands for you as a care partner. God, I feel so bad that I'm telling us to blame the PPA, but that's really taking a communication right away from them. Unfortunately, sometimes it's more practical to have to do that.
Sometimes it can lead to more anxiety or more tension, and to the point of, the spoons and the time of day. Like, sometimes I think of, for all of us, like our brain, our communication well is kind of like a bank account, and we can make deposits and we can make withdrawals. And sometimes things that are deposits, like socialization and, like, going out with people that you love or going to do something you love, also, it's it's not a free deposit. There's a tax that comes off of it. And so balancing that bank account can be really hard. It can vary, honestly, moment to moment for a lot of people. And it's just about doing your best to mentally keep that checkbook. Because, when you overdraft, which we've all overdrafted, like our own selves, and we've seen our partners and people that we work with overdraft, that you get that overdraft fee, right? And it's a disproportionate fee to whatever you put in. So I like the spoon analogy that you gave. I just want to say too, there's so many wonderful, like you said, comments in here. And to Barbara Patterson's point, sometimes I think my husband understands, or I think my husband, sorry, has a predetermined idea of what's in his head. There's a miscommunication, and if it's not what he thinks is going to happen, there becomes this upset. And that's so hard on you and everybody involved there. Does anybody have any strategy? Not even strategies, just anyone have any dittos or strategies or like one time this worked or sometimes this worked that they might want to share? Go ahead, Abby.
I just want to acknowledge a recent question because I know, Kathy, you have discussed this. There's a question here that says, and well, maybe we should do the strategies first. I don't want to come off
We'll do
topic.
the strategies and then I'll write it down
Okay.
to circle back
Okay.
to the
So, yeah, so what are the
question.
strategies for?
Like share any of your experience, what you've learned and are learning about this situation where there's a miscommunication and someone's upset.
One of the things that happens with us is that we've always been very complex talkers. Lots and lots of topics going back and forth in rapid succession. And it's been important to me to learn to break things down so that I'm asking one question, not do you want this or do you want that, but do you want this? Just adapting that much helps him not be frustrated, because if he says, I don't know what he's saying this to, or this or this or whatever it is, I'm not sure what it is that I asked that he's hearing. And another thing is to we have to sometimes just laugh because there is just the ridiculousness of it. I mean, my husband went like this once, and I thought I said, "Do you want to go for a walk?" And he was telling me there was a mouse running across the room, but I mean, that wasn't obvious to me. So that's just we just have to go. Oh, for heaven's sake!
I think something for in our situation is yes and no have become very confused. Not when he hears them, but when he speaks them, the nodding and head shaking also are confused. And so that was causing a lot of confusion. And so the thumbs up and thumbs down are really, really important in our world to kind of keep things from getting to keep those things from happening because it can be really confusing.
And that's a great point that you just said, because that goes along with apraxia, right? The yes, no, the gestures of the head is a form of apraxia. So people say no or yes. And that's why maybe having a support where there's a written yes or a check mark or a green, something to validate or confirm that you're not, so you're not reversing the yes or no.
Yeah, there's something called binary reversals, and it's related to apraxia of speech and other PSP, progressive supranuclear palsy, and other movement stuff that happens on this strip of the brain generally. And they don't totally know why it happens. It's kind of this like inhibition system, this brake system where it's the first thing that comes out is the opposite of what you intend. And so people, you can move to a gesture system, and that can work for some people. Other people benefit more from having like a color coded or like a visual. And I always like recommend, like, just in case like the hand coordination becomes difficult, like have the yes no there. You don't have to like practice using or force anybody to use it, but just it being present. I mean, practice is great, sure, but like that's like real speech pathology. Let's practice yes no, right? um, and like it's more like, listen, let's communicate how we can communicate. We'll have this here so it doesn't look like this, like, what is this laminated thing with a red no and a green yes and all that. So that can be one way, one strategy. I have them in like a bunch of different languages if anybody needs. I can post those, or if you email ppa@aphasia.org. And to Andrea Patch Smith's question, I've never been clear on what those questions we need to talk about are while we still can. Just the other night, Charlotte, who's one of our aphasia ambassadors, she's our only PPA ambassador. She's a care partner of a parent living with PPA, and she recommended Five Wishes, a website, and it's a really, I downloaded it for like myself and my family. Like, it's a very concrete, kind of, relatively short, covers all the bases. And it gives you just kind of that framework and that anchoring to go from. And if it's difficult to understand for anybody, we can, we can support you at the NAA with adapting that material. PPA@aphasia.org.
I would say some of the most important questions or things to figure out is getting power of attorney is really, really, really important for finances, but especially medical care right now. That has come in. I have had to use that so often. That's the most important thing that we have done so far.
How have you had to use it now?
I've had to use it in the medical world when we've gone for different things. If he broke his ankle, things like that. I've had to use it dealing with his brother's estate because he's the executor and he can't communicate over the phone. And so I've had to use that a lot. I'm going to have to use it as I'm trying to get his student loans,
Okay. So it's something that when he was able and you were able to have this conversation, that designates you as someone that can speak on his behalf and make the
Yes.
decisions if and when he's not able. Right.
Yes.
And in your 40s, that's a tough conversation. I mean, it's a tough conversation at any age, but it makes us think, regardless of whether aphasia is really, really present and whatever's going on in anybody's life, we should probably all think about those hard topics.
Yeah, I will say too, like, totally anecdotal, and I maybe shouldn't say this on like recorded webinar, but it's the reality. Like, FTD, typical onset is the 50s, right? PPA broadly is typically an earlier onset syndrome. I see people from the 30s to the 80s, and it can be a lot harder when you are younger. If you break your ankle and you go into the emergency room, they're like, well, why are you making all these decisions for him? Like, what, like, is this okay? There's just more suspicion. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's an age bias, certainly, and a lack of awareness. But also, they they're trying to do their best and like make sure their patient is okay. So, like, no shade on that individual necessarily, but it's a broader, more systemic issue there. And so having that as, you can whip it out when you need it can be really helpful. Because for people, your automatic, next of kin is your spouse typically. And then, it goes down from there. But there's just, in hearing from the families that I work with, there's just more questions when in an emergent situation, which is like the last time you need to be like, you know, validating your existence in this person's life, right? So that can be just one kind of layer of burden to take off. Well, put on while you're getting it done, and then once it's done, take off if you need it later. So
I'll say real quick, we're not married, and so that has added to the need to have the power of attorney,
right.
especially, and that's made that really important. And I have had I have definitely gotten questions that alluded to, am I abusing him? Am I talking for him? And is it an abusive relationship? So, again, the power of attorney is helpful.
Yeah.
And frankly, a will is
Yes,
really useful. The earlier you do that, the better. When a person can really express what they want and don't want.
yes.
I think one of our sillier experiences was we were trying to make a financial transaction, and I said, well, I need to speak for him because he has aphasia. And they said, well, he's going to have to authorize you. So I said, good luck with that. I bring over the phone and hand it to him, and he's just, you know.
Ah, over
What
the
you don't
phone.
understand is that he can't talk. That's the whole point. He can't authorize me to talk for him now.
That is a very interesting scenario when it's not face to face.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I could have said, hello, yes, I'm Dr.
Oh,
Risby.
okay. That's, I said you have to be an actor. I didn't think you'd really go as far as changing your voice.
Had my son come in or something, and or the neighbor and just say, yeah, it's fine if she talks to you, because it's just stupid.
It is.
So, all right. Well, I think that addresses certainly a vital topic. We've got a couple of other points that we discussed we thought could be important. Do any of you have something just off the top of your head right now that you would like to segue into? If anybody's thinking about something you'd like to provide?
I have a real quick thought. One of the things that we did earlier on was to assemble our medical team. And that means we have a neurologist, we have a psychologist who deals with loss, and we have a psychiatrist to deal with, sometimes the emotional outbursts or something that were a more common feature early on. We were able to help, that the psychiatrist was able to help that a lot. And so things are much more tranquil. Just for emergencies.
And that's a great point. And I think most people here that are listening probably resonate with the fact or understand that not all mental health professionals know enough about aphasia and how to provide communication support for people with aphasia. And we know as PPA evolves that providing more communication support is necessary. And speech pathologists try to align with as many mental health professionals as we can to provide them with ways that they could support and advocate for communication needs of their people who also need mental health guidance.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
can
mean
be.
to be a detention hog or anything, but I also participated early on in something that that was being run up the flagpole called in a study called Savvy or Telesavvy, which was basically training for partners of people with brain conditions. And it was more focused on dementia of Alzheimer's dementia, things, but it was really helpful in terms of my building up my resources.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I attended a TIPA Snow training that I'm sure a lot of people are probably familiar with. Again, it was, geared more toward Alzheimer's or other kinds of dementia. It wasn't specific to PPA, but yeah, it was a lot of helpful information.
Yeah, I will put Tipa Snow's website in the chat.
So let's pivot to thinking about communication between partners and now how PPA comes with you outside of the house and how you deal with your social opportunities with or without the person that you may have once before, and if PPA does interrupt some of those things and how you deal with that change if there has been one in your life.
So my partner has always been one of the most outgoing people I've ever known. Just an extrovert, loves to talk. That was his identity in his job. Love, just was the funniest person, could just entertain a room. And so he still wants to be very social. He needs it. So we have a card that says that please be patient with me. I found it online somewhere and it explains what's going on. And he eagerly hands it to people when he first meets people or doesn't or hasn't seen somebody in a while. And everybody's been amazing and so kind. And once people know, I found it also takes a lot of the burden off of me because I found I was carrying that because I was aware that other people didn't know. And so suddenly I felt like I don't even know. It's really a relief for me when he gives it to people. Um, because then I know that they know. I've also found that suddenly I'm his interpreter a lot of times, or And I'm more of an introvert, so that's been a transition for me because he still wants to talk and he looks to me to or taps me and tell this person that and so that's been a transition, but that's how we deal with that. The card has been really, really helpful.
Does he voluntarily take it out?
Hmm.
Yeah, we have some on our website. I'm putting a link to it in the chat. The PPA awareness cards are at the bottom, and there are different I put like,
I think that's where we got it. Yeah.
okay. I like, just like yesterday, I heard the first time, like in the wild, somebody using it. They were like, oh, these were helpful. And I was like, oh, that's great, because the AFTD has some too, and you can see if those suit you better. And there's some from, the Stroke Foundation, American Stroke Foundation, or that you can link to on the card on our website. You can get a link to the card, but there's different options, and people may or may not want to disclose. And if there's something that doesn't suit you, but you would like one, PPA@aphasia.org, and I will put one together for you.
And there was such a time where people didn't know what PPA was. And forget aphasia, right? Now you put two P's in there and it's like PP what? And fortunately or unfortunately, there have been more headlines about PPA in the news. And I think when we say that we're talking with someone who has PPA and they're like, what? A lot of us say, that same diagnosis that Bruce Willis has, or Wendy Williams, or, and that makes it a little bit more or less scary and intimidating. So I think that Emma Willis's work that she's done to really promote awareness for FTD is doing a lot of good justice for people we need to all advocate for. I hope as communication and care partners, we recognize that there's a lot of burden and responsibility. And part of that responsibility could be to educate others and to make sure that your partners are deservingly receiving the best support that they can. And that's not easy, because as it changes, those communication supports have to change too. So,
In the chat we have, how do I get my husband, in this case, or my partner, on board with engaging in like a day program or some kind of like social activity where you can get some rest? Has anybody kind of navigated that? Or, okay, you can't, like, I can't be this person, or I need a break, or think something like building that boundary so that you can have sort of your own identity and your own time. I don't know if anybody in this group has done the exact day program,
I'm
but
trying to tackle that right now and having a hard time with it myself. And I know it's because I know that my spouse will be resistant to it. Like, I don't need that. I talk to people, that kind of thing. But I also know that it's important to do that, especially if you've got we do at this point have a good medical team and a great speech therapist who's on the screen there. And, everybody has pretty much said to me, it's time for you to begin to introduce this in small increments. So.
but
I
again,
just engaged somebody this week, just to come over for 2 hours, and I took a walk, and it was beautiful fall weather. And my husband wasn't excited about it, but I basically said, this is for me, so I have peace of mind when I'm out. He'll probably be fine, but maybe not, because at one point I came home and he was on the floor. That can't happen again. Another thing that nobody has raised, because maybe it's unique to us, but with my husband's condition, which is like a PSP, which is more a Parkinson-esque thing, his face is pretty still. So that means that his affect is not reflecting how he feels. He looks like he's slightly cross all the time, or serious when he's actually being, amused or laughing or, and it's training for me to understand that that I'm not reading the faces the same way I used to read them.
It's also Fraser, my partner has that, especially if he gets tired or just it looks like he's frowning. And I have to remind myself that it's not really how he's feeling at the moment a lot of times, but I have to tell other people and explain that to other people because it can be really uncomfortable to you're engaged with somebody who is frowning and you think that you need to change something in the room or something that's happening that's upset him, and for people to understand that it's not reflective of how he's feeling generally.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And PPAOS and a lot of non-fluent agrammatic PPA has, is associated with these other kind of movement um, disorders, at least some of the symptoms. And we talk about the communication piece in like speech because we are very like ableist oriented, speech forward society. But I think we underestimate the power of just telling somebody like the control and the resting face and the control of facial movements also changes. So don't take it personally. I think the yes, no, and the facial expressions can really like go a long way for people. And I don't know what everyone else's experience is with like friends, but a lot of people that I work with are like, friends are like people are pulling away. People are just like not sure how to deal, so they like give you your space. And a lot of times I'll work with people and like, all right, let's get a list of like 3 things you need to know. Like not to, we're not trying to make everybody use all these dynamic communication strategies all the time if for the kind of the next layer out of the network. But what are those like 3, 5, whatever things that like somebody really needs to know and understand to be able to communicate or just to be able to be comfortable enough to be around and spend time and connect with that person that they used to, because people get uncomfortable like when there's a communication breakdown and like no aphasia, no PPA, like outside of the scope, when we have a communication breakdown, it's uncomfortable. And so when there's a layer of, PPA or, neurodegeneration or whatever they read about when they Googled it, then people get all wigged out. And it's kind of another person's hand that you have to hold through the process. So I don't know if anybody has experience with friends and that outside that kind of nuclear or immediate support group, if they have anything that they'd like to share about that.
Oh, I do, because he has wanted so much to just continue just engaging with friends and stuff. And what I've found, at first, I felt hesitant to actually, text a friend and give, 3 or 5 suggestions or help hints. Because I kind of felt like I was stepping over a boundary or something. Like this was his friendship, and it just like I was in invading that friendship. But what I found is they were so grateful because that they didn't know how to talk to him, and all they wanted was to know how to talk to him. And so just giving people a few clues, basic ones, like the yes and no or a frown doesn't mean that he's unhappy, or don't be afraid to ask him to repeat something. He's happy to ask him to write it down, just things that seem almost obvious to us after being with the person for a while, but somebody who's not familiar with it, it's intimidating and they don't want to hurt his feelings, or so they won't talk. Yeah, so they'll pull away. And so I've found that to be really helpful.
I think oh, sorry.
No, Kath, your turn.
I think that slightly different from Becky and Lisa, Karen is very understandable. She doesn't have apraxia speech. So, and she's similar to Fraser, Lisa's partner, was always the more outgoing of the two of us, the the party animal. Everybody loved Karen and a lot of fun and this, that, and the other. She's still a chatterbox. It's just that what is coming out of her mouth may not be exactly what she's intending to say, and she's using the wrong words or whatever. And so sometimes what I have found frustrating, even to this day, with people who've known her and know what the situation is, and you've fed them the information, is they'll continue. Well, number one, after seeing her briefly or running into us at the farmer's market or whatever, they'll later report in, Karen's doing great. Karen seems great. But what they've done is just talked a mile a minute to her. She's not able to follow it. She's smiling and nodding. And then the minute they walk away, she turns to me and goes, well, she might nowadays turn to me and say, who was that again? Or she'll say, can you tell me what they said? And so sometimes I try to circle back with people and say, if you're going to visit with Karen or do something, you gotta slow up. You have to use simpler sentences and stuff.
I actually think when you guys were saying that, just like the aphasia card is so helpful to let others know about how to communicate or what aphasia is. I was seeing someone today in sort of like an assisted living facility where when I walked into the person's room, there were two laminated sheets that were very extensive about toileting and all these things. This person does not have PPA. It was just like what to do when treating or coming to visit him, right? And as you're saying this, Kath, I'm thinking, how great would it be just for like all of the intimate people in your person's lives to have like a go-to little what helps so and so the most. All right. And so you as care partners don't have to always tell them, right? So you remove that burden from yourselves. I'm going to make a little thing how best to engage, come up with something funny. Don't avoid tough topics, whatever it is, be truthful, try to keep it simple, indicate when you're changing a topic, have visual supports if that helps. Whatever would help that particular person at that time, that could be available, readily available, that you email people that are going to see her or something that could be referred to. I think that would be another thing to consider that I don't think I've done to say when we do communication partner training, we do that, but do we ever provide something for the communication partner as a reminder, as opposed to something that just, I probably have tons of them around here, that just lets the person with aphasia point to and refer to.
My husband used to be a professor of communication of all things. And so he told me early on, when we have like people over to dinner, give them a really quick brief before we have the evening. And since all of our friends are real verbal chatterboxes, he would be writing something in response to a topic, and we would be 5 topics past that. So, we learned to, I said, just put your finger up, and told people if he's putting his fingers up, he means I've got something to say. Give me a minute.
Mm-hmm. And it's just like, let's remember, I mean, it sounds like, oh, this is so easy to do, right? It's not. It's not easy. But if we try to remind ourselves that this aphasia is like another part of the body that needs some type of modification. And if someone was at the dinner table or in the scenario, Becky, that you just described, and food was being served or the temperature in the room was awful for that person, they'd be like, I can't eat this kind of food. It's too cold in here. Please turn on the heat. So it's the same thing. Like, hold on, we're mature adults here. We need to respect each other. And it's not easy, especially when there are multiple conversations going on, but at least we know we could inform others of everybody's needs, even when it's just understanding or patience that one needs to have. I think it's a slippery slope on how to bring that up when there's a crowd of people, but it's very effective.
I know some people, this was such a wonderful chat.
No, I love this one question. Kiiya, look at this last question.
I know.
That's what I wanted to.
Appreciation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in here.
Okay.
And just, I mean, this conversation could go on for hours. There's so much insight, both from the professionals and from those of you living with this experience. And you have been so thoughtful and vulnerable of sharing this, and it's so appreciated. And there's so many questions that have been asked regarding resources. And so I wanted to point out first that the National Aphasia Association is working with Kiiya and other people in the PPA arena to make sure those that information and those resources get on our website. But we also, when we finish recording this and put it on our YouTube, we will put all those resources in the description as well. So please know that we are not ignoring your question, that we will absolutely share that information. We only have a couple minutes left, so I really want to make sure that the questions that or comments that you as a panel really wanted to get across to other care partners are heard. And specifically the question that Andrea just asked about, do your partners express their appreciation for all your help, or am I asking too much? I think that's a very powerful question. So I'm going to let you guys, the panel themselves, comment on this, and then we'll wrap up with some last minute slides and the PDH form.
Well, does anyone want to say, Kath, I saw Kath Klein said, yes, that your spouse does recognize that.
And she says it a lot, you know.
Right. Sometimes when words are hard to find, right, that type of acknowledgement and appreciation isn't often heard or felt.
Yeah.
But that's why I like to remind people that imagine that the person wants to, perhaps, and maybe even before aphasia showed up in their lives, they weren't so appreciative, but to recognize that they probably are, and it's hard to say. I know that one of the things, you guys can add, but I know that, Lisa, you just mentioned one thing as a care partner. Could you just share for those of us that are here and listening, just a little quick blip about the information you have found for care partners about research studies and ways people contribute or participate in that, just with like a minute or less left to let them
Yes.
know that it's out there?
So the main place I've found this information is the FTD Disorders Registry. Um, and you can sign up as a care partner. And what they'll do is it highlights care partner research studies that you can be part of. And I've done many of them, and they're over the phone or they're surveys online. One that I just enrolled in is like 8 months, and it'll be groups and, Zoom calls and things like that. But I found it helps me find a purpose in this whole thing, this confusing journey. The other one is clinicaltrial.gov, and both of those have been very helpful resources.
Well, I have to bring it back to the NAA as
Yes.
that is my
Yes.
job. But we have been working very hard since June on the new website. And Anna Kasdan, who is just amazing, another researcher who has volunteered many hours to the National Aphasia Association, has just recently finished updating with our web people our research section. So if you go on our research section, you will find a post a study and find a study, post a study section. So researchers, if you're out there, please share your studies here. It does also have a live link to the clinicaltrials.gov because a lot of these studies are there also, but we want to make sure that they're searchable on our site. So we have divided, we have categories now. So there'll be a whole section for PPA, and we are populating that section. So stay tuned and get back with that.
Awesome, Kiiya. Kiiya, that was great that she just added that. That is awesome. If everyone sees in the chat, you might want to click that. Those are the resources that Mara just referred to.
And I am going to show you here on the website. This is a screenshot from the website that Kiiya has worked very hard on this, as has a lot Becky Kiiya as well, and lots of people have given us some resources for here. But under About Aphasia, this has gone from, what was it, one paragraph about PPA in our old website, Kiiya?
One incorrect paragraph.
And
Was not aphasia accessible.
we have a whole section now, thank goodness, and are continually adding to the PPA section that's on our website. You'll also note this is where you can find events and then the research tab that I was talking about here. Also wanted to remind you of the PPA YouTube playlist. So we took all of the talks that have been done on the topic of PPA and PPAOS and put them in a separate playlist under our Ask the Expert. So we really encourage you to check those out. I love all of them. The one with Dr. Maya Henry is my absolute favorite one. Just really well done. Ask the Experts. I'm going to ask if anyone has anything further after I just remind people that a speech pathologist, if you have stayed for this whole thing, you can scan this QR code for a certificate for your professional development hour and save that for when ASHA audits you. And so I am going to stop sharing my screen, reminding you that when you log off here, you will have a little bit of a survey. We are working really, really hard at the NAA to make this topic and all the topics that are important to families with aphasia a priority. And it's important that you all realize that we have been around maybe almost 40 years, but we can't do it without you. So please, as this end of year comes up, look at our site, tell us what we need, and please support the National Aphasia Association in any way you can. Any last comments before we say goodbye to this amazing panel?
I appreciate all of your willingness to share what's not often a glorious topic, a tough one, but also I hope one that's filled with love and reminders, if no one else does, that as care and communication partners, you are unbelievably valued and appreciated.
That's a great way to end it.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. And please keep in touch with the National Aphasia Association. Yeah, well, you'll get this recording and some resources. So thank you all. We really appreciate it. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Right.